Peace, peace, y'all. Welcome, welcome. You already know what it is, what time it is. We have another crucial breakdown with myself. I am Vinny, Vinny L. You can find me on Instagram at vkid underscore. You can find me on Facebook. It's my Facebook page. I got a podcast going. It's called Truth of the Mind with Vinny L, where we delve into some very, very interesting topics. Please take a look. I'm on SoundCloud. I'm on YouTube. If you ever want to find any more of this information. All right, but on today's Crucial Breakdown, I have some interesting uh, books of literature to share. I am big with collecting info. I have a Dropbox with tons of ebooks, dropping ebooks for days, just on all types of topics: Freemasonry, Islam, Mohammedanism. Just some stuff I collected. American continent, original peoples, Akabulan, Asiatics. Some different Europeans, Caucasians. Got some real dimes in here. But today I wanted to highlight some stuff I have from Mr. J.A. Rogers. J. Rogers, if you don't know. All right. J.A. Rogers. Joel Augustus Rogers, Jamaican American author, journalist, and historian who contributed to the history of Africa and the African diaspora. After settling in the U.S. in 1906, he lived in Chicago and then New York City, became interested in the history of African Americans in this country. So born 1880, died 1966. All right. Now this brother put out a lot of this information in the 20s and the 30s. He was probably the first of his kind to drop the information he dropped. One of the books I have here, I have The Real Facts About Ethiopia by J.A. Rogers. All right, this was a book he wrote mainly in response to Italian aggression against Ethiopia at the time. Ethiopia put itself in a position where it wanted to attack or recolonize the lands that it used to have during the Roman invasions. Now, what I find interesting, I love the images. All right, the images are always something special to look at. Now, over here, of what race are the Ethiopians? So I'm gonna delve into some of this. In these crucial breakdowns, I just read from some of it and I try to explain and try to decipher exactly what's being told so that, it's a common understanding for the average layman. All right, so now we have in J.A. Rogers, The Real Facts About Ethiopia, of what race are the Ethiopians? Okay. Because of the increasing importance of the Ethiopians in world affairs, certain writers, inspired no doubt by their old prejudice against Afro-Americans, are widely denying that there is any racial relationship whatever between Ethiopian and Afro-American. The Ethiopians, according to these writers, are Semitic, Hamitic, Caucasian, without a single drop of Negro blood, etc., etc., etc. Now, as regards the word Negro, there are two interpretations, which are widely different, namely the American and the universal. In the United States, one as fair as a Scandinavian may be socially and legally a Negro. Further, a black man who speaks with a foreign accent, wears a turban, or is of another nationality may be told that he is not a Negro. For instance, there was the case of Dr. Hubert Harrison. So just to break what Jesse was saying, the world has a different interpretation of black blood. All right. In the United States, obviously, you have light-skinned brothers out here who are brighter than many so-called white people in a sense, but are considered Negro still because of the taint. There's a certain taboo that comes with the Negro branding. It's not only the skin color, it's the facial features, it's the nose, it's the mouth, it's the eyes, it's the way the head is, it's the way the body is shaped, right? Dr. Harrison was a full-blooded Negro, Dr. Hubert Harrison, a distinguished native of the Virgin Islands. When he applied for naturalization papers, he was set down by the authorities as white. Harrison was Danish, and in the ethnological omniscience of the State Department, Danes are white. Hence, Harrison, though coal black, was a white man. Another light-colored Negro from Jamaica, the same was true. All right? Color white, complexion brown. Negro Puerto Ricans are also set down as white. Okay, so bam, this right here, this just proves that so-called color and complexion, in many instances, were considered two totally different, separating things. All right, but then you have to look into the interpretations of law, of status, of how it affects your social standing. Okay. In short, Negro in the United States is sometimes caste, sometimes race, sometimes both. Really, to be able to define what is a Negro, a scrambled brain is the first essential, and a touch of lunacy qualifies one as an expert. All right. In other lands, however, a Negro is usually an unmixed black man with woolly hair, thick lips, etc. In the Orient, on the other hand, one drop of high caste blood makes one high caste. It is culture, not color, that counts. Africans who come from the interior are of cruder culture and are looked down on much as in our lands country folks are. But from the days of the pharaohs, Negroes from the interior, who had the ability and the power, suffered little handicap. Many rose to be rulers, one of the most conspicuous being Kefir. All right, white and Negro. Okay, key, bam, bam. Listen up. White and Negro, it must be remembered, are English. Their application to peoples of native African and Arabian descent is therefore an attempt by the English-speaking to denote social status. But since Orientals think not so much in terms of race as in terms of the social standing of the individual, and that also of his tribe or nationality, color designations as white and Negro are almost meaningless to them. Wow. So what is he saying here? So the English, they were applied by English speakers to denote a certain social status, right? To class them in a certain caste system, to be able to classify them in a certain way in order to put them beneath their group politics. This is group politics 101, right? Now, in Asia, those terms are meaningless because it's all about the tribe or the nationality, right? They only worried about what tribe, what nation. They're not worried about what you look like. In Cairo, Egypt, the writer once saw a man of the deepest shade of ebony with short, woolly hair and a Grecian nose. A dragoman, or guide, who was about three-fourths Negro and was a Bedouin, told him that the man was a Negro, that his parents held others like him as slaves in Arabia, and that he himself was not a Negro. Others, when questioned, confirmed this. Tipu Tib, first ruler of the Belgian Congo, was known as an Arab, a white man, but to all appearances, he was a full-blooded Negro. Who is Tipu Tib? Okay. Crucial breakdowns. We always ask the questions, and Google is an excellent source. Look, you top. Tipu Tib. Woo, this is Tipu Tib. They say this is an Arab, a white man, right? Right? This man owned the Congo. This man. So again, how is it that Tipu Tib, first ruler of the Belgian Congo, was known as an Arab or a white man and not black for all intents and purposes? If we use the American definition of Negro, which includes all the shades from black to light yellow and white and all textures of hair from silky blonde to tightly curled wool, then every Ethiopian this writer has ever seen would be a Negro and nearer to the pure type than the average Afro-American. Very interesting what he's dropping here. Okay, so just understand that the color really doesn't give you a proper understanding. Peace. Here we go. In reality, there are only two varieties of mankind. Peep this, the black and the white. All the others, as the Mongolian and the Indian, are in between. This is a common sense view, but in ethnology, as in phrenology and theology, there is need for a mass of mystifying names in order to impress the uninformed. You know, J. Rogers again. He is quite cynical in many of his writings and his interpretations and the satire that he writes in between. So you know, you will enjoy yourself if you understand the message. Okay, but here he's basically establishing that black and white, the complexion color scheme, all right, are just two varieties of mankind. They're two varieties, likely in the extreme. Two varieties to the extreme. Everything in between, Mongolian, Indian, Arab, Malaysian, right? Hawaiian, etc., Samoan. As regards the Asiatic origin of the Ethiopians, it appears that a people known as the Habesha migrated to Ethiopia from Yemen, Arabia. Some writers are insisting, therefore, that the Ethiopians are Asiatics, but that was before the Christian era. White people have been living in the New World only 5 centuries. Does one still call the descendants of Europeans in America European? All right, now here, Mr. Rogers again, uses the satire and poses a question: if we are calling Ethiopians Asiatics, why aren't we? Because they came from Yemen, Arabia, right? Ethiopia migrated, Habesha migrated to Ethiopia from Yemen, right? These people are termed Asiatics today. If that's the case, you would have to call the Europeans in America today, who have been in America for the last 4 or 5 centuries, you would have to designate them as European. Now, I take the view that you're damn right you need to. You need to call out these modern Europeans because that's what they are. They're not Americans in any sense of the word. I mean, they may have, if they do have lineage, they have to acknowledge it in order to become part of that. But, a lot of people, they try to play both sides. You know what I'm saying? Like, honestly, in many sense of the word, since you have a right to declare your nationality based on the United Nations rights of indigenous peoples, the rights of the child, these declarations, they allowed us to essentially choose in many senses of the word. Now, we know that bloodline relations, ancestry, kinship, that's a totally different argument. There are certain times you can't just come out and say, oh, I'm a Chinese and pretend you're Chinese now because you say you're Chinese. You are who you say you are, but you have to be that. Right? Let's continue. As regards the Asiatic origins, okay, we read that. The Yemenites are not only Negroid, but it appears that all the present inhabitants of Africa, save the Pygmies, originated in Asia. All right. Now I have his 100 Amazing Facts of the Negro here. And in that book, he establishes clearly that all African tribes look to the East for their origins, meaning Asia. Now, this really puts a damper in a lot of Pan-Africanists and a lot of pro-African sentiments, knowing that you're not, and it goes back to what Elijah Muhammad said in many respects, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. He designated the entire world once being known as Asia. All right. And it makes absolute sense when you go into the history. All right. Going more. General history of Ethiopia. Okay. Understand Ethiopia is very essential to the so-called black population of the United States and of the world because of the image that they created over the years and the significance that they hold in world events. Ethiopian history goes so far into the past that what is said of its beginnings cannot be proved, but neither can it be disproved. The name of its founder, according to the most reliable records, was Cush. The date of its founding is set at 6280 BC, which is 3 times as long as from the birth of Christ to the present time, or a total of 8,200 years. It had 2 capitals, Napata and Meroe, whose mighty ruins still stand. Ethiopia was known to the Egyptians as the land of Cush. The word Ethiopia, like the word Egypt, is of Greek origin and came into use much later. So, bam, understand that even Ethiopians at the time and Egyptians at the time weren't calling themselves those names. They were being designated to them by the people of Greek origin, the Hellenistic. All right, let's continue. The Egyptians called their land Kemi. The Ethiopians probably called themselves Nubians. This part of Ethiopia is now in the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. So this is only a part of Ethiopia. Another Ethiopia also extended to the southeast on the Red Sea. This was Habashat, the Abyssinia or Abyssinia of the Greeks. and was a part or a province of the first. It might even have been its motherland. This part of Ethiopia was also found by Cush, and its capital was Axum, whose relics also speak of a mighty past. Later, these two Ethiopians seem to have drifted apart, for in the 4th century AD, the Abyssinian Ethiopia invaded the Nubian one. Ethiopia in its earliest history included not only Africa, but southern Asia as far as India, according to Herodotus. All right? Ethiopia was believed to be, by the most ancient scholars, to have been the first of the nations and the mother of civilization. Modern scholars, basing their opinion on excavations, generally deny this. But since much is yet undiscovered, and since the ancient scholars were near the event, it seems logical to give them the benefit of the doubt until such time as the modern scholars have filled the gaps in their records. So J.A. Rogers makes it plain here. Ethiopia being the mother of civilization. All right, you need to study about Ethiopia. If you don't know about Ethiopia, man, this book is a very short read. All right, it's only 21 pages, but it gives you a ton of history, ton of accurate information. Okay, it gives you highlights of Ethiopian history. You have Memnon, king of Ethiopia, left Susa, his capital in Persia, with an army of 200,000 men to go to the aid of his uncle, King Priam, in the famous Trojan War. We're talking about Kushite Trojan War. That's his uncle. If that's his uncle, king in the Trojan War, think about the history behind who these people are and how it applies to you. All right. We have Makeda, queen of Sheba, visited King Solomon in Judea of Abyssinia. Sheba, Queen Sheba. Their son Menelik mounted the throne of Ethiopia. Candace established Christianity at her capital, making Ethiopia the first Christian nation. Oh, you a Christian, huh? Oh, you Christian, huh? Let's see about that. Let's see if you know about the originations of the first Christians. All right. Just more history. Again, if you guys need this information, please leave a comment. Leave me a message. Drop your email. I will send you access to the Dropbox. I'll even email you the file. Please just send your information. We can have we can go do a little back and forth, and I can show you what I got. Maybe you can show me what you got. We can make something happen. All right. The story of Italian aggression against Ethiopia. This appears an image of Menelik, the warrior empress Taitu, and Ras Makonnen, father of Haile Selassie. All right. Okay. So now, who are these people? Why are they important? What is the Battle of Adwa? All right. Let's read. Let's read a little bit. All right. I'll skip a little bit. I'll go down to bam. In 1876, when that arch murderer, voluptuary, and lover of good things to eat, Leopold II. Bam! Who is Leopold II? Do you know who Leopold II is? This is what we do in Crucial Breakdowns. For the people who do know, please, just give us one moment. Leopold II of Belgium. He was king of the Belgians, born in Brussels, the second but eldest surviving son of Leopold. He succeeded his father to the Belgian throne. What was he known for? King of Belgium. Country rulers. Whoa, they don't say much about the Congo. What did Leopold? He established Belgium as a colonial power in Africa, best known for the widespread atrocities that were carried out under his rule, as a result of which as many as 10 million people died in the Congo Free State. It's a hell of a guy. Leopold II, he took away the rich empire of the Congo from its owner, Tippu Tip. After this happened, a rush of the European powers that in less than 30 years took away nearly all of Africa from its original owners. Think about the timeline, 1876. When is 1876? That's only a few years before when? If you know about African history and the colonization of Africa, you know about the Berlin Conference. Berlin Conference, 1884 to 1885, also known as the Congo Conference. Regulated European colonization and trade in Africa during the new imperialism period and coincided with Germany's sudden emergence as an imperial power. All right. understand that these actions, this is history. These are pivotal events that you need to know about. All right. Now, let's read. At that time, Italy was too exhausted from her long struggle for independence against Austria and the Pope to reach out for any. When the Suez Canal was opened, the Rubattino steamship, an Italian concern, leased the port of Assab from the Sultan of Rahita as a coaling station, paid about $9,440. 10 years later, the Italian government, spurred by the rich loot being taken out of the dark continent by Leopold and others, began to have African aspirations. She recalled the vast empire that Rome once held in Africa. Accordingly, she gave Rubattino 43,200. That's about a five-time double on quadruple for a Saab and placed it under her flag. So Italy bought the Rubattino port and put it under her flag. Most of the land along the Red Sea, though worthless, is of high strategic value. It lies on the route to India, England's most prized possession. England, highly mistrustful of the entry of another power, made strong protest, as did Egypt and Turkey. All right, the only friend that Italy had in East Africa was Ethiopia. All right, but in 1882, Italy formally placed Assab under the Italian crown. This was the first colony she had in Africa since the days of the Caesars. Another pivotal moment, Italy taking its place in Africa, once again trying to redo history on some vain, idyllic conquest. All right. Now, Italy reached out for more. She was being beaten. Let's see, yada yada. Again, please, let me know if you need this. I'm gonna skip a few. Okay, here. Let's go back to 1885. Italy, having squatted to the northeast of Ethiopia, made it clear that she meant to annex the ancient empire simply by marching in and taking it, as England, France, Belgium, and Portugal had done other parts of Africa. At the time, Ethiopia was being torn with civil war. You had John, son of Theodore. He was at war with Menelik II, the rightful heir. All right. Agostini de Prejudice, the Mussolini of that day, seized the opportunity to invade Ethiopia and annex the choice portion adjoining Eritrea. It was Menelik's land, but the robbery made John uneasy. After Menelik had been eaten, his turn would be next. So this was basically a civil war going on, and this was basic tactics for European colonizers in the time. They would step in, pick a side, or they would try to ignite the fires of both sides, and then simply come in and take over all of the land. Again, this is a history lesson in and of itself. This shows that constant us as so-called people of color, so-called Black, Hispanics, Latinos, fighting amongst each other allows these usurpers to come in and take over. All right. Leaving his rival John, Menelik marched against the Italians. Several skirmishes followed, with Menelik sometimes the victor, sometimes the Italians. On January 4th, 1887, Menelik captured Count Salembini, who had penetrated into the interior on a supposed scientific mission, and held him as a pledge that the Italians would quit. They refused. The Ethiopians, commanded by the Rasulullah, thereupon marched against the Italians, whose forces consisted of 512 whites and several thousand natives. They met at Dogali in January 26, 1887. Surrounded by the Ethiopians, the Italians were thoroughly defeated, the only survivors being 82 wounded. On this, the remaining Italians in Ethiopia retreated to the coast, leaving behind their supplies. The moment seemed favorable for the Ethiopians to push Italy from East Africa. But they stopped. They contented themselves with occupying the strategic posts. All right. The defeat at Dogali by a black nation aroused deep anger and humiliation in Italy. Think of the reaction from the heads of state and the reaction from the other European powers, especially at a time when so-called Africans were considered barbarous, less than human. He was driven from office. Italy, burning for revenge, voted $6 million for the war, sent out 12,000 well-equipped white troops and a large army in those days, supplemented with 13,000 black troops. The Italian commander, General San Marzano, entered Ethiopia in December 1887, determined to conquer it once and for all. In February 1888, he captured Sati and built a railroad linking it with the Masawa. But when a clash seemed near, the Ethiopian army suddenly retreated. The reason was that their old foes, the dervishes or Mohammedans, had invaded Ethiopia. Again, you see how the infighting, but in this case, let's keep reading. We'll see how in this case it saved them. The Italians, perhaps not knowing this and thinking it a trap, retreated to their territory also. But they returned and were defeated. Again, they quitted Ethiopian territory. These three failures made Italy realize why England and the other European powers hadn't gobbled Ethiopia. Britain had invaded in 1867. All right? This had been done with the general consent of the Ethiopians. And Britain had retired immediately, taking with her some priceless, as England usually does, taking priceless Ethiopic manuscripts and the Kebra Nagas, or Ethiopian Book of Kings, which had first been written in 400 BC. All right, so going down a little bit, John and Menelik thought themselves justified when they saw the Italians aiming at their territory. So again, you had this back and forth with the Italian forces in Ethiopia. All right, when Baratieri permitted the pillaging of Adwa by native troops, Menelik realized that no confidence whatever could be placed in him. So Adwa was pillaged. What the Italians did not know, moreover, was that their aggression had driven John and Menelik together. So again, an aggressive act by the Italians causing these two people to come together. Finally, all right, the two made a treaty. Menelik should be John's heir. To bind the bargain, John's son, the Rasaria, married Menelik's daughter, Zaiditu, or Judith. Soon after, John was killed in battle with the Mahdi, a Negro prophet who had driven England from the Sudan. The Mahdi is a very important individual. You need to know about his history. We can do a quick, just for those who don't know about the Mahdi. The guided one. Okay. Now, again, he's a figure in Islam. Okay. But in this case, you had a lot of them here. Muhammad Ahmed. He was a Nubian religious leader of the Samaniya order in Sudan who, as a youth, combined religious study with a mystical interpretation of Islam. He was proclaimed the Mahdi by his disciples, the messianic redeemer of the Islamic faith. But wait, how you have the Mahdi and John of Ethiopia in battle together? Isn't Mahdi of Islam? Let's just keep reading. Again, you need to plug it in for yourself, and maybe you'll find something you didn't know about. Ras Mangasha, John's son, claimed the Ethiopian throne, and civil war broke out again. Count Crispy, then premier, saw his opportunity. Crispy's dream, like that of Mussolini's, was an African empire stretching from Sicily to the Straits of Bab el-Mandeb and taking in Tunis, Egypt, the Sudan, and Ethiopia. Accordingly, he took advantage of the disorder to march into Ethiopia. At the same time, he sent a mission headed by Count Antonelli to hail Menelik as the rightful sovereign and to make a treaty with him. This treaty, known as Wuchale in Ethiopia and Wuchale in Italian, was signed in 1889. It lent money, arms, and ammunition. All right, Harar was to be ceded to Italy. 2 copies of the treaty was made. Ethiopia had pledged to make all negotiations. Italy, now triumphantly, all right, again, it's all about image. All right, what was the Italians trying to do? They were portraying an image that they were going back to the days of Rome. Italy now triumphantly announced to the European powers that Ethiopia was her protectorate. All right, he sent ammunition, modern cannons to his new son, Menelik, who gave him land, Asmara. 4 years of peace followed, despite continued Italian aggression on Ethiopian territory. Italy justified herself by deciding that she was dealing with an inferior people. So again, as Europeans do, they oppress and they push, they want the land. So that's ultimately what they're trying to do. About 1892, Menelik was seized with the ambition to modernize his country as the Japanese were doing. He instituted a postal service and struck coins and stamps with his own effigy. To this, Italy strongly objected. Why would you object to a nation creating services for the citizens? Then he started to make treaties with Germany, Russia, and Tucker, the Ethiopians, on which Italy exploded in wrath. She said that according to the terms of the Treaty of Wuchale, Ethiopia had pledged to make all negotiations with the other powers through her. Menelik objected vigorously. He pointed out Article 17 with the Amharic word, Ichaluchal. Excuse me, this is the word right here. I probably butchered it. Ichalachal, which means may if he pleases. Use Italian diplomacy. The Italians insisted that in their copies the word was must use Italian diplomacy. So may if he pleases you Italian diplomacy, or must use Italian diplomacy was the 2 different languages. But you show how in this treaty you have 2 different languages. The people of Ethiopia had their own language. They had their own nation, so they were able to interpret it the way they needed to interpret it. And they understood it the way they needed to interpret it. And nothing was false. Ultimately, they found out Oriental scholars of Europe and Africa submitted the treaty, and they agreed that he was right and that he had not made his country a protectorate of Italy. So again, wise leaders, knowing how to do treaties, knowing treaty negotiations. All right. So what happened? What happened? Apropos of this, on December 18th, 1895, the Marquis de Udine, ex-premier, admitted in the Italian parliament that Menelik was right. Menelik, eager to maintain his long friendship with King Humbert of Italy, wrote him, I realize that the Amharic text and the Italian version of this Article 17 differ, but in citing it, I stipulated that Ethiopian affairs could be treated by Italian diplomacy on my invitation. I have never promised to have it done by Italy alone. Your Majesty ought to understand that no independent power could ever make such a concession. If you have the honor of your ally Ethiopia at heart, you'll change this. Italy, realizing what it would mean to her prestige in Europe if she yielded to this black, and as she deemed it, barbarian people, replied through her envoy, King Humbert cannot yield. It would hurt the pride and dignity of her people. Menelik, with the thought of his country's 7,000 years of independence, flashed back. If you have your dignity, so have we. The Empress Taitsu, warrior wife of Menelik, added, you wish to make us your pupils, but that will never be. Your Majesty, said the Italian envoy, this means war. Then let it come, replied Menelik firmly. We cannot permit our integrity as the oldest Christian nation to be questioned, nor the right to govern ourselves in absolute independence. Menelik's first step was to return the amount of the loan with 3 times the stipulated interest. He took care to keep the arms and ammunition. Italy, already beaten back 3 times, was cautious about attacking Menelik. However, he sent an envoy to him asking him to yield. Menelik, like Haile Selassie, pledged to fight to the last man rather than surrender. So again, this made Menelik a man of enormous prestige. The people of Ethiopia clamored for this man. He was considered God sent in many ways. Whatever be our differences, we can never permit our country. So he got his friends, he got his associates in the area. Did they want to submit to the white man who had seized and enslaved all the rest of Africa? Menelik addressed them in stirring language. Whatever be our differences, we can never permit our country, which has maintained its freedom for 70 centuries, to be ruled by an outsider. You have seen what the white man has done to the rest of Africa. Do you, a proud fighting race, want to be enslaved like the other inhabitants of this continent? Ethiopia has never been conquered, and she shall never be as long as she preserves her indomitable spirit. Ethiopia shall stretch her hand only to God and to smite her enemies. All pledged their allegiance. The Ras Magasha, Menelik's chief foe, asked to be permitted to lead the attack. I will drive out the Italians, he said, with the very bullets they gave me to kill you. Okay? So here we go. Again, it's war. Italy, 4 million, sent out 15,000 more men. To show his defiance, he seized 3 Ethiopian princes who were studying engineering in Switzerland and held them as hostages over the protest of the Swiss. Italy won at first. They defeated Mangasha. Another victory as Delpha was telegraphed to Rome and magnified into a triumph. The war was already won. But these successes were only a trap. Mangasha had been instructed to draw the enemy into the country away from his base toward Menelik, who was awaiting with 90,000 men. On December 7th, 1895, the Amba Alagi, the advancing Italians, 5,200 strong, encountered the vanguard of the Ethiopian army, which was commanded by the Ras Makonnen, and were killed to a man. All right. The 500,000 that the Italians had to pay had been paid for the ransom of the captured Italians. In returning these, Menelik showed a strategy which some military experts declare is without a parallel for shrewdness. He had the Ras Makonnen escort the prisoners to the Italian lines, at the same time giving the impression that he himself was going to attack Adwa, another Italian post. But when halfway, he changed his direction and marched on the main body of the Italian army. The first of these movements had served as a screen for the second and had completely fooled the Italian scouts. Before Baratieri was aware of it, he found himself blocked by the main body of the Ethiopian army. Retreat was his only salvation, but since he could not be sure even of that, he tried to make terms with Menelik. The latter demanded the payment of 12 million and the evacuation of all Ethiopian territory. For the next 5 weeks, negotiations went on. The two armies rested within 18 miles of each other, so you have a standstill. All right, but ultimately, you have the ultimate battle. All right, here. Faced with the conditions, Baratieri telegraphed to Crispy, making known his precarious position and saying that should the enemy attack, he hoped to be able to repulse him. But Crispy, who was faced by a similar crisis at home in which to reinstate himself by a coup, sent a stinging reply. He accused Baratieri of suffering from military rheumatism. Give me a decisive victory or out you go, was his ultimatum. On the night of February 29th, 1896, Baratieri took advantage of the moonlight and the fact that the next day was a great feast of the Ethiopians, that of St. George's, to advance. Warned by his scouts, Menelik moved forward, although a third of his men were away for the holiday. By using mountain passes unknown to the Italians, he crept upon them and surrounded them almost entirely. At 6:30 the next morning, the Italians opened battle. Their mountain guns played havoc with the massed Ethiopians, but Menelik, bringing up his modern quick-firers, replied with vigor. Then he gave the order to advance on all fronts, and the Ethiopians, sweeping down, pressed the Italians into such a closely packed mass that they could not use their guns. Many of their cannons were found after the fight unfired. There, after the battle, was a massacre. The Ethiopians speared the foe like sheep. By 3 p.m., the Italians were in full flight, leaving 12,000 dead. The Ethiopians did not pursue them, but the black subjects of Italy, taking advantage of the defeat, slaughtered the fugitives. Among the slain were Italian generals. A third was captured, 7,000 men. The entire supplies were fell to Menelik, whose loss was between 3,000 and 5,000. All right. The victory resounded around the world. It amazed Europe and heartened black men everywhere, especially it gave to the oppressed Africans new hope. There was a rush of the European powers to make treaties with Menelik. From being considered an insignificant barbarian, he became a figure of importance. All right. Thanks to the Battle of Adwa, the Ethiopian Empire has lived for 40 years unmolested by the imperialistic ambitions of the West. Very key moment in history, the Battle of Adwa. All right. Now, I have some other information in this book. Now, here, this is the chief of the Ethiopian army and the young dame. Look at the regalness. Look at the attire. Look at the swag. Let's talk about the swag we got now. I want this type of swag, guys. I don't know about y'all. So here, slavery in Ethiopia. I wanted to get another point in with slavery. I wanted to squash some things. You know, if you don't know these things, you need to get these books and you need to be clean. All right, you need to be clear on all of this. Slavery in one form or another exists in nearly all Africa today. It was only in 1928 that the slaves of Sierra Leone, Britain's oldest African colony, were finally freed, or were said to be. In Ethiopia, slavery goes back to the most ancient times. It was also sanctioned by Mosaic law, which Ethiopia still uses. The first slaves in Ethiopia, as elsewhere, were prisoners of war who were unable to pay ransom. So again, whenever people talk about slaves, especially with so-called black people, you have to understand that they're talking about prisoners of war. You have to make that connection because that's the only way you can become enslaved. You're not born a slave unless your parents were enslaved or your ancestors were enslaved. So in that enslavement process, what war did they become slaves? The slaves begat slave children. Ethiopia, nearly always at war, continued to accumulate slaves. So think about this clearly in that sense. Now, Ethiopian and other Oriental slavery differ widely from American slavery. All right, this is what I have a lot of people who always look at slavery in like the so-called Arab slave trade. A lot of people point that out and the travesties and the oppression that went on in those times. But you have to understand, Ethiopian and other Oriental, what's Oriental? Asia, Central Asia, Western Asia. All right, these Oriental slavery, they differ wildly from American slavery. It is domestic servitude. The slaves, far more often than not, became a member of the family. Slaves who have children by the master are not only freed, but the children are treated in all respects like the legal ones. A son by a slave mother might in time become the head of the family. Many rulers of the Mohammedan Empire, even at the height of its power, had slave mothers. Indeed, these were preferred in order to avoid political meddling by her family. Sometimes these slave mothers were Ethiopian. Menelik, the greatest of the Ethiopian emperors, prior to Haile Selassie, had a slave mother named Edgig Ayihu. Ethiopian slavery was never as degrading as American slavery. When Haile Selassie became regent, he took steps to wipe out slavery. It was, moreover, one of the conditions by which Ethiopia was admitted to the League. It was impossible, however, to bring about immediate emancipation Because large numbers of the slaves had no homes. Turned adrift, they would become either beggars or bandits. Many also refused to leave their masters. All right. Italy praised a lot of praise for Haile Selassie in his fight. Then it gives you a lot of information, general information. If you're into Haile Selassie, all right, or you're into the Rastafarian, this is very, very key work. Bam, Haile Selassie. Here we go. Some quick info on the brother. As you see, it's a picture of him, Haile Selassie, Lij Yasu, deposed emperor, and Ras Biru. All right. Currently on a mission to Japan. Look at these brothers. Regal. Haile Selassie I, King of Kings of Ethiopia, last of the independent sovereigns of Africa, and now center of the world's attention, was born July 17, 1891, or 1883, according to the Ethiopian calendar. His father was Daraz Makonnen, a nephew of Menelik, who distinguished himself in the victorious war against Italy in 1896. He was an extraordinarily bright youth and showed great promise of statesmanship at an early age. He continued his studies under Ethiopian and European tutors. Menelik appointed him governor of the Baso, which post he filled with such competence that he was made administrator, the most important province of Ethiopia, while he was not yet 20. At this time, he nearly lost his life while crossing Lake Arumuya with 7 others. The boat capsized. He swam ashore. The rest were drowned. As a result of political intrigue, he was removed from Harar and sent to the distant province of Kaffa, but thanks to his skill and integrity, he was soon restored to Menelik's favor. On Menelik's death, Lij Yasu, Menelik's grandson, came to the throne. Lij Yasu's father, the Ras Michael, was a Mohammedan, and Lij Yasu too showed Islamic sympathies. He took several wives, wore the fez, and sided with the Mad Mullah, a Mohammedan prophet who had driven the British from all of Somaliland to save the coast. Ethiopia's policy for 1600 years has been a Christian one, as the King of England pledged himself to maintain Protestantism, so the Emperor of Ethiopia must swear to uphold Christianity. Lij Yasu, by his observance of Mohammedan customs, was thus violating Ethiopian law. During the War of 1914, Lij Yasu also sided with Germany and tried to bring about a union of Christian and Mohammedan against England and her allies. Since Ethiopia is of strategic importance to Britain, the maintenance of Christianity in Ethiopia and her friendliness to England are of vital political importance to the welfare of the British Empire. Hostility to Britain might have meant war against Ethiopia. Therefore, the Abuna, or head of the Ethiopian church, and the Ethiopian leaders deposed Lij Yasu. In his place, they put Zawutitu, or Judith, a daughter of Menelik, Haile Selassie. Then the Rastafari was named heir to the throne and regent. Lij Yasu's father, the Ras Michael, gathered a large army and marched against the Christians. In a great battle fought at Segal on October 27, 1916. Think about the time. What was going on in 1916? What was going on? World War I. Part of a bigger narrative, don't you think? A much bigger narrative. Anyway, the Ras Michael was totally defeated. Haile Selassie, who was one of the Christian commanders, distinguished himself by his generalship and his valor. Right, he toured Europe with an imposing retinue of 30 Rases or princes with their trains. Some of these were his secret enemies who were plotting to take his place, and he took them along so that he could keep his eyes on them. He was received in different countries. So a very famous, a very powerful person. And all his reforms has had to go slow. He cannot change the psychology of his people or educate them overnight. His countrymen call him Arco, for when he believes he is right, he stands firm. In features, he is Oriental, a fact accentuated by this beard. In color, he is a lightish black-brown and considerably darker than one would infer from the published pictures of him. In reality, he is what one would call in the United States a dark mulatto, judged both by his color and his hair. In his general expression, he has been aptly described by one writer as a black edition of the pictured Christ. All right. Let's see, more Haile Selassie, more about Haile Selassie. It just gives you a whole bunch of information. Okay, I'm not going to spend any more time on this one, though. I just about covered a lot. This is The Real Facts of Ethiopia by J. Rogers. Okay, now I have more info for y'all. Again, if you need the Dropbox, hit my line. Get this Dropbox. We got the goods in here. We have sex and race. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Next up, we got sex and race. Sex and Race, Negro Caucasian Mixing in All Ages and All Lands by J. Rogers. Okay. Let's check. If you ever look at a book, for anybody, if you ever looking at a book The first thing you need to do is look at the table of contents. To even find out if the information in there is even worth looking at. All right, sometimes you don't even need that information. It's not what you're looking for. All right, but I just wanted to drop some quick dimes. I want to show you a lot of the images he has here, especially the images. The images that he has in his books are said he's a great conqueror of Cush and Assyria and a famous builder as Amen, the most powerful of the Egyptian god. Nectanebo, statesman and military leader, opposer of the Assyrian invaders. Thutmose III, the Napoleon of the far antiquity, conquered the then known world, was wise administrator and merciful ruler. Pharaoh of the 12th dynasty, another image. Daughter of Akhenaten, sister of Tutankhamun. The Queen Thi, mother of Akhenaten, in Berlin. Amenephis, father of Akhenaten and a mighty conqueror, an Egyptian princess of the 18th dynasty. I like looking at the pictures, to be honest, in these books, but I do want to drop y'all some information. He goes into just about every nation. Talks about India. Here we have Indian images. All right, you have Indian, you have West African, you have ancient Egyptian. Okay. Here as well, Indian rulers and notables. Okay, these are all Indian people, but look at the features. Okay. Let's see. In India, as in the Near East, black women were and are taken freely into the harems of the rulers. Burton says women with white skins are supposed to be heating and unwholesome. Hence, the Hindu Rajas slept with dark girls in the hot season. Incidentally, in Africa, white men also choose Negro women for the same reason. Their skins are said to be velvety and cooling. As regards skin color, the Kama Sutra, or love precepts of the Brahmins, teaches abhorrence for a very white skin or a very black one, and places both in the same class with a bad-smelling woman. The passage reads, woman not to be enjoyed, a woman who is extremely white, a woman who is extremely black, a bad-smelling woman. Interesting. Who was the first Chinese? Bam. The Ottoman Islanders, right? The Indo-Chinese, Siamese and Malay, were the first Japanese Negroes. Okay? This is a Central African Negro right here. A Mongolian, a Laplander. Peep the changes in the phenotypes, okay? Let's see. Negro strain in the Filipinos. Peep. Siamese Belle. Ex-King of Siam. Here. Right here. A French Indo-Chinese soldier. South Sea Island mother. Japanese beauty. Again, we're looking at phenotypes here, and we're trying to show this is a Belle of Tahiti. Okay. Now, when talking about the Islanders, let's talk a little bit about Chinese and the Asian origins here. Let's do some Chinese research, all right? In the first epics of Chinese history, the Negrito type peopled all the south of this country and even in the island of Hainan, as we have attempted to prove in our study of the Negritos or black men of this island. Skulls of these Negroes have been found in the island of Formosa and traces of this Negroid element in the islands of Ryukyu to the south of Japan. In the earliest Chinese history, several texts and classic books spoke of these diminutive blacks. Thus the Chu Li, composed under the dynasty of Chu, 1122 to 249 BC, gives a description of the inhabitants with black and oily skin. Interesting, huh? Let's see what they're talking about here. The prince Liu Nan, who died in 122 BC, speaks of a kingdom of diminutive blacks in the southwest of China. Additional evidence of Negroes in China is given by Professor Chang Xing Long in an article entitled The Importation of Negro Slaves to China under the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 AD. He says the Lin Yi Kuo Chua topography of the land of Lin Yi contained in Book 197 of the Chu, the south of Lin Yi, of the Chu Tang Shu. Let me read that again. He says the Lin Yi Kuo Chua topography of the land of Lin Yi contained in the book 197 of the Chu Tang Shu, Old Dynastic History of Tang, says, quote, the people living to the south of Lin Yi have woolly hair and black skin. Chinese folklore speaks often of these Negroes, he says, and mentions an empress of China named Li, consort of the emperor Sai Wu Wen, who is spoken of as being a Negro. He adds that according to the writings of a later period, the 7th to the 9th century, Negro slaves were imported into China from Africa. Bam. Just some food for thought, y'all. Just some food for thought. The Negro strain is more evident in the southern Chinese. Negritos of pure type still live in Siam in the Malay Peninsula. Who were the first Japanese? There's a very evident Negro strain in a certain element of the Japanese population, particularly those of the South. The Negro element in Japan is recognizable by the Negro aspect of certain inhabitants, with dark and often blackish skin, frizzly or curly hair. The Negritos are the oldest race of the Far East. It has been proved that they once lived in the eastern and southern China, as well as in Japan, where the Negrito element is recognizable still in the population. The Japanese are a mixture of several distinct stocks: Negro, Mongolian, breadth of face, intraorbital width, flat nose, prognathicism, and brachycephaly might be traced to the Negro stock. All right. Quatrefagus, Professor, I probably butchered that name, Quatrefagus, Professor R.B. Dixon, and others also think that the Japanese show a Negro strain. In Japan, the ancient Negrito element may still be discerned by characteristics which are at the same time exterior and osteologic. A word for y'all who don't know. Osteologic. Y'all go look that up. All right, let's go down. Again, this book, J. Rogers, he covered it all. And this dude wrote this in the 1920s, the 1930s. All right, this is 100 years ago he was dropping this information. Damn near 100 years ago. The Negro in ancient Greece. Here he gives you images. Alexander the Great, he speaks of. This is a young Roman emperor. But we know about Rome and it's connected to Carthage and the Negroes in ancient Rome. Carthage in North Africa. Let's read about Carthage in North Africa right quick. The earliest North Africans were, as was said, the Negritos. Bertolone and Chantre, leading authorities in the anthropology of North Africa, also placed them as the first, a position which it appears they continue to enjoy to a high degree well into the historic period, as finds from the ancient graves have revealed. They say of the skeletons from these graves, some characters possess marked Negroid traits, and such are not always persons of no importance. Indeed, the celebrated priestess of Tanit showed numerous Negroid traits, marked prognathicism, flat, wide nose, long forearm, and had the physical traits of the Neolithic Negroes. In still another sarcophagus with rich belongings, they found the form of a woman who presented marked Negro characteristics. This North African region was once known as Barbary, and its people, the Berbers, or barbarians, who, despite the bad use to which their name was put by the Europeans, were once leaders in culture. The Berbers claimed descent from the Mazoi, or Negro soldiery, that was the backbone of the Egyptian army. So understand what they're saying here. They're saying that the North Africans, these Berbers, these North Africans, Morocco, Tunis, Libya, these areas to the north and the west of Africa, these areas were populated by people of the Negro soldiery that was the backbone of the ancient Egyptian armies. Today, these Berbers range from coal-black to white. One of the latter group, the Kabyles, have lived in the fastness of the Atlas Mountains since the 5th century AD. They are said to be pure whites, but they too are mixed. All right. So let's do some more stuff. Were the Jews originally Negroes? Okay, these are Falasha Jewish students of Ethiopia. The teacher. All right. The entire Semitic and Hamitic population of Africa has a mulatto character that extends to the Semites outside of Africa. All right. Every kind of intermingling has taken place between the original groups of the Negro, Hamitic, and Semitic peoples. What is Semitic? What is a Semite, right? This has always been a question, right? Mention was made of the biblical theory that Negroes became black because Noah, supposedly white, cursed the sons of Ham. But the earliest Jews were in all probability Negroes. Abraham, their ancestor, is said to have come from Chaldea, and the ancient Chaldeans were black. The Chaldees, says Higgins, were originally Negroes. As was said too, relics of prehistoric Negroes have been discovered in this region. It is even possible that the Jews originated not in Asia, but in Africa. Gerald Massey has advanced considerable argument in proof of that theory. Whatever was the original color of the Jews, they lived for more than 4 centuries among the Negroid Egyptians. The supposed oppressors, the pharaoh Merneptah, shows marked Negro traits. Only 70 Jews went into Egypt, but according to the Bible, 600,000 men left it, which must have meant an additional 2 or 3 million women and children. Because there's always more women and children than men. Since the Jews were slaves, their women were undoubtedly more than 3 centuries. Since the Jews were slaves, the women were undoubtedly concubines of the Egyptians. It must have produced mixed offspring. After more than 3 centuries of slavery, almost every trace of the first 70 Jews must have been lost together with their culture. Thus, Jewish culture was Egyptian culture. To get an idea of what must have happened to only those 70 Jews, think of what has happened to Negroes in the U.S., who came in hundreds of thousands over a period of centuries and not all at once as the Jews did in Egypt. The Negroes are so Americanized that were it not for their color, one would forget that they even came from Africa. So, just more of it. This brother drops all of this. What race was Muhammad? He answers the questions that a lot of people are afraid to ask. Types of the Anglo-Egyptian Sudan. Look at these faces, right? All of these are considered so-called black people. Even these guys, right? Oldest daughter of Haile Selassie, Princess Sahi. The Ethiopian, East African, right? West African, mulatto, right? Under Islam, sex and race. This is Saud, king of Najd, Ibn Saud. If you know about Saudi Arabia, you need to know about this guy. Right? These are Bedouin, Arabian ladies. These are modern Egyptians. But it just shows you if the ladies were there, they was having some type of I won't get into it. Types of the Near East Egypt and Arabian mulattoes and near whites. Man, I know a girl who looked just like this. I ain't gonna lie to you. Bam, more images. Bandsman of the present Sultan of Morocco. Right? Morocco's richest man, the late Sultan Moulay Youssef. Look at these guys. More images. Moroccan, Algerian, and Tunisian mulatto types. No, I'm not just here to show you. I want to show y'all some images, and I want to give y'all some information. I don't want to just hand y'all, read all this to you, though. You guys have to dig into this, and you have to find out the truth of the matter. Because there's so much information out there, and if you take the time to read some of these books, look at this image. Negro-white mixing in Germany. Germany seems to be no different from the other countries mentioned. The famous Neanderthal skull, the oldest Negro type known, was discovered at Dusseldorf, Germany in 1856. Whoa, 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 whoa. What is he saying here? The famous Neanderthal skull, the oldest Negro type known. The Neanderthal skull is considered a Negro type, discovered at Dusseldorf, Germany in 1856. In Mecklenburg, in Silesia, in the southeast, it was the Proto-Negro type that was in the majority. He also thinks that an early Negro people inhabited eastern Norway. Julius Caesar undoubtedly took Negroes in his legions to Germany. The skull of an ancient Negro was found at Cologne. Baron Gold thinks it was that of a Christian martyr since it was pierced by a nail. The Huns, a Negro-Mongolian people. The Huns, a Negro-Mongolian people. So for all y'all who don't know who the Huns are and your connection to the Huns, a people who overran Europe in the 4th and 5th centuries AD also contributed much towards the present German stock. The Huns had swarthy skins, flat noses, and frizzly hair. Jordanus, a writer of the 6th century who saw them, says they made their foes flee in horror because their swarthy aspect was fearful. Of Attila, their greatest leader, who was called the Scourge of God, Jordanus says he had a flat nose and a swarthy complexion, showing the evidences of his origin. McRitchie says, too, that certain of the Danish tribes living in northwestern Germany were, like the Moors, black. And as was said in the chapter on Japan, we have clear evidences of an ancient Negrito race in northern Europe into Laplanders. He's dropping dimes, yo. Like, he's giving it all. A study in black and white from pro-Hitler Berlin. Look at the way it's just like a horror movie, isn't it? All right, African-Americans in Germany. Some more images. This is a pre-Hitler German advertisement. This is how Germany looked at so-called blacks. This is a pre-Hitler advertisement in Germany. Very different image, huh? A lot more, This looks like a regular advertisement. It's like, he's with a lady, pretty lady, right? Right? Let's go down some more. These are some in Sweden and Denmark. Intermarriage, race mixing, the race mixing of blacks and whites here. Let's read this. Let's read a little bit about the blacks in the British Isles. All right. were the first Britons Negroes. There is considerable evidence that they might have been. Grimaldi relics have been dug up in England. Very ancient huts, strikingly like those of Africa and the South Seas, have been unearthed at Glastonbury. Ring money of the kind used by the Negroes of the Sudan to pay tribute to the pharaohs, and which is still being hammered out by African goldsmiths, has also been found. Blue beads of 1500 to 1200 BC that are common in the Egyptian ruins have been found in considerable number in the Stonehenge district. All right, but if that's not enough, he gives you more. African relics or other kinds have been discovered. Von Rietlow says implements recovered from the oldest and most classic terraces of the Somi and the Thames are indistinguishable in contour and shape from those of the Val and Caledon valleys in the Orange Free State or from the Bushmans and Eris rivers in the Cape. Our conviction that the cultures presented in the old Stone Age of Europe and South Africa, and for that matter of the western half of the Old World generally are most closely interrelated, grows steadily. We believe that from some common center, most probably in Africa, prehistoric folk carried their cultures to practically all corners of the Old World, and that the problem of the prehistoric in Western Europe and South Africa particularly form part of a closely interwoven whole. All right, I'm going to end it right here with the sex and race. Yo, if you don't got this book, if you don't read this information and finding out how the connections, royal ancestry and Negro. That's a pretty long one. Negro scandal in royal circles. Race making in the British Isles. Yeah, I'll stop at some of these images. Pushkin. Alexander Pushkin, you know about him? King of Naples, right here. Murat. But again, you know the frizzly hair, y'all. We ain't even got to. We're not even gonna argue. I ain't gonna argue with none of y'all about none of this. Let's continue. I have one more piece of literature I want to show you guys. No. Nope. Why do I always do that? Nature knows no color line. Okay? In all of his books, J.A. Rogers, he gives a general interpretation of all the information. He's very, very thorough. And a lot of information sometimes even goes against other information. So it gives a good read and it shows you the evolution of his thoughts. All right. I am not aware that any competent scholar has ever examined into the question of the stage in history at which difference of color acquired the importance it now possesses as a social and political factor. I think he's right. If it has been done, I have not seen it. The first recorded instance of color prejudice is in India, right? When the Aryas or the Aryans invaded the valley of the Indus and found there a black people, the Dacius or the Dacius. Okay. In the Rig Veda, their national god is depicted as blowing away with supernatural might from earth and from the heavens the black skin which Indra hates. The blacks were called Anasas, or noseless people. He slew the flat-nosed barbarians. India's caste system was based on color. All right. These are just some of the images he has here. These are some of the Negroes. So a lot of the images you see of Negroes of coats of arms are from J.A. Rogers' books. Him showing these coats of arms with these Negroes and these names of noble families. How did they become nobles? You got a turban on, right? You got the headband. These guys got the nose rings, the earrings and the nose rings, right? Peep game, peep game. Amorim. Look at these guys. Very interesting info. So again, if you need some of this info, please hit my line. I'll drop some of this to you. Details from the slave market. Not only images, but prudent information that we all need. J.A. Rogers, at this moment in history, all so-called black people need to be familiar with this brother's work. All right? To be honest with you. If you aren't, please, we gotta educate everyone. All right? This is the Black Venus. Excellent piece. But again, look at the face. These facial types, whether you know it or not, show ancestry to the Negroid stock. The nose, the eyes, the way the forehead is shaped. Okay? Germany and Belgium. Mulattoes. These are mulattoes. All right, y'all. But I'm gonna back out. I've been here long enough. I'm gonna drop this on my page on Facebook. If you're not aware, I got my little group that we got going in the ATL area. If you're in the ATL area and you're trying to find somebody to study with, hit up the study squad. Got tons of information. All right. No, but I'm Vinny L. I just wanted to drop y'all some new things. This has been a crucial breakdown. You can always hit me on Facebook. Always hit my page, V Kid Pursuit of Enlightenment. All right, you can go to SoundCloud. You can check me out with Vinny L. Truth of the Mind, where I give you more information. And talk about other things as well. And please comment, leave me a comment. Let me know if you learned anything new, or if you disagree with some of the information Mr. Rogers was dropping, and or if you want to access some of this information, please just hit me up a message, leave a comment, and subscribe, show support. I'm doing this right now for the love of my heart. I really want to give information to the people. I'd really appreciate any type of criticism, any type of critique, any type of review that you want to give on my work. Please follow, and peace and love to you guys. You guys make this thing go. It's my love for the people that really makes me want to find out this information and share it with you guys. All right. So y'all, peace and love, y'all. Take it easy. All right. Till next time.